For 22 years, my parents called me the burden, while my sister was their golden girl. At the reunion, Dad toasted her. "We only have one daughter we're proud of." My sister laughed. My father was still holding his glass in the air when I stood up. The string lights over Uncle Rob's backyard made everything look like a party. The folding tables, the 60 relatives arranged in their summer clothes, the projector screen they'd set up for the slideshow of family photos that had run during dinner. My grandmother's garden, roses along the fence, the tiered cake on the dessert table that my Aunt Karen had driven 4 hours to bring. My father's voice had carried across the whole yard, the way voices carry when the speaker is confident of their audience. "We may have 2 daughters by birth, but we only have one daughter we're truly proud of." He raised his glass toward Qley. "To Qley, our golden girl." Qley pressed her hand to her mouth in the performance of someone who is embarrassed by praise they have been expecting and preparing for. She was wearing a white jumpsuit. She had arrived 20 minutes after me in a car my parents had helped finance, and when she stepped out, people had actually clapped. Not organized applause, the spontaneous kind, the kind that happens when a room recognizes its protagonist and responds accordingly. I had arrived in a navy dress from the clearance rack at Target. I had sat down beside my grandmother and she had squeezed my hand and said, "I'm so glad you came, honey." Now my father's glass was in the air and 60 relatives were looking at Qley, and nobody was looking at me, and something inside me went very quiet. Not the quiet of hurt. I had spent 22 years with that quiet and I knew its texture. This was different, cleaner. I stood up. I walked to the projector table. I plugged in my phone. "That's interesting, Dad," I said. "Since we're being honest tonight, I brought something too." I pressed play. "Let me tell you about difficult, not the word itself. I've read enough about family dynamics and labeling and the specific damage of being assigned a role in a system that needs you in that role to function. I know the theory. What I want to tell you about is what difficult actually looked like from the inside for 22 years. My name is Emily Hargrove. I am 34 years old. I grew up in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, the older of 2 daughters, and for the entirety of that growing up, I was the one who required management. Not because I was wild or destructive or genuinely hard to parent, because I had the specific inconvenience of noticing things accurately and occasionally saying so, which in my family was classified as attitude, which became difficult, which became the story they told about me until the story became the room I lived in. My parents, Linda and Gary Hargrove, are people I can describe most accurately by saying that they have always organized the family around Qley's comfort. My mother is warm and capable and has spent 30 years being the kind of mother who shows up, just not always for both daughters with equal frequency. My father is a man who believes deeply in the performance of family values without examining whether his specific family values hold up to scrutiny. They are not monsters. This is important to say plainly. They are not monsters. They are people who made a choice, repeated daily across 22 years, about which daughter deserved the resources and who eventually stopped examining the choice because examining it would have required admitting what they were doing. Qley is 29. She is beautiful in the specific, cultivated way of someone who has always had the time and money to be beautiful, who has never worked 2 jobs or worn clearance rack dresses to family reunions. She is not unintelligent. She is something more specific than unintelligent. She's a person who has been so thoroughly protected from consequence that she has never developed the understanding that consequences exist. The understanding is there in the abstract. The felt knowledge of it has not been allowed to form because every time it should have, someone removed the consequence before it landed. I worked 2 jobs through college. My parents paid Qley's rent, car insurance, and credit card bills through college and for 3 years after. I stopped crying when my mother forgot my birthday, not because it stopped hurting, but because at a certain point the hurt becomes information rather than event. The information it conveyed was, "You are not the primary consideration here." I integrated that information and adjusted my expectations accordingly. What I did not adjust, because I am apparently constitutionally incapable of it, was the reflex to help when they called. 3 years, $18,000. Wired in amounts that ranged from $400 for what they described as an emergency utility shutoff to $6,200 for what they described as a medical bill. Each time with a specific story, specific urgency, specific language calibrated, I understand now, to produce the particular response in me that I had been trained to produce. I need to prove I'm not the burden they say I am. I need to show them I'm responsible. I need to make them see me differently. They saw me exactly as they always had. The money went somewhere else. I found that out 2 months before the reunion, standing outside my parents' back door in the specific stillness of a woman who came to return house keys and heard her sister's voice through the screen and made a decision she did not fully understand at the time. I had stopped by on a Thursday afternoon. Not unusual. I had a key. I was in the neighborhood. My mother had texted asking if I still had the spare set from when I'd watered plants the previous month. I came around to the back because the gate was open, which it often was, and I heard Qley before I could announce myself. Her voice had the quality it gets when she's solving a problem. Focused, purposeful, the specific efficiency of a person who is good at logistics when the logistics serve her. "You have to stop asking Emily for money directly. She's getting suspicious." I stood in the gap beside the back fence. My hand was already in my pocket, around my phone. I have thought about why I pressed record rather than walking away or walking in, and I think the honest answer is that I had been suspicious for months, and this was the confirmation, and some part of me knew that without documentation documentation, the confirmation would not hold up against the weight of the story my family had been telling about me for 22 years. I pressed record. I stayed outside for 11 minutes. I have listened to those 11 minutes more times than I can count. The first time I listened to them, I sat in my car in my parents' driveway for 37 minutes before I could drive. Not crying, just sitting, with the specific physical weight of something very large that has been in the air for 22 years and has just landed. What the recording contained, what Qley's voice and then my mother's voice and then my father's voice contained. I will tell you because the telling is the point, and because I played it for 60 people in a backyard in Nashville, and they heard every word, so there is no version of this where the words stay private. Qley explained the system. She had been telling my parents for years that I was selfish and unstable. Her words, specific and deliberate, so that they would not feel guilty extracting money from me. She had been monitoring my financial situation. She had seen my bank statement, she said, when I left my laptop open at Christmas. She knew my savings number. She had communicated it to my parents as a resource. She has savings, Mom. She can afford it. My mother's voice in response, she already paid the hospital bill. That should be enough. Enough. Qley. Dismissive. She has more. We just have to ask right. The medical bills I had wired money for. The ones I had sent without hesitation. In the specific way of a person who has spent 22 years trying to prove she is not the burden they say she is. We're not all medical. Qley said it plainly. Some had gone toward her apartment deposit, a designer handbag, car repairs after she crashed while texting, which she had not disclosed to my parents as the cause because the cause was inconvenient. I listened to this in my car with the engine off. Then came the part I have thought about every day since. The part that I had barely been able to breathe through the first time, that I have since learned to play back with the specific detachment of someone who has processed something and put it in its correct category. Emily always tries so hard. My father's voice, with something in it that I recognized, with full comprehension, as affection, not malice, but the comfortable affection of someone describing a resource they find reliable. She'll pay if we make her feel like she owes us. She does owe us, my mother said. We raised her, didn't we? A pause. Then Qley, with the specific amusement of someone landing a line she's been holding. Barely. You raised me. Emily raised herself. I heard a sound in the recording that it took me 3 listens to identify. My own breathing, from outside the fence, steady and controlled. I did not know at the time that I was keeping it that way deliberately. I think I did it instinctively, the way you go still when you understand that the thing you are witnessing requires witness rather than interruption. I drove home. I transferred the recording to my secure drive. I made a file. Then I called my therapist, Dr. Rachel Kim has been my therapist for 4 years. She is a licensed psychologist with a specialty in family systems and financial abuse, and she was the first professional I told about the $18,000, not because I hadn't recognized the dynamic, but because I had been telling myself a story about the dynamic that was more comfortable than the accurate one. The comfortable story was, my family takes from me because they're struggling and I'm capable. The accurate story was the one on the recording. I played her the recording at our session the week I found it. She listened to all 11 minutes. When it ended, she was quiet for a moment. How are you feeling? She said. Clear, I said. That's the thing. I feel very clear. What do you want to do with it? I had been thinking about this for 5 days, since the afternoon in the driveway. I need documentation, I said. The transfers, the messages, everything they asked for, everything I sent, every excuse. Why documentation? I looked at her window, at the ficus she keeps beside it that has been slowly outgrowing its pot for the 2 years I've been aware of it. Because without it, I said, the story is just my word against theirs. And they have 22 years of calling me the difficult one, the unstable one, the burden. I paused. I want the record to be complete. And then I'm going to decide what to do with a complete record. She nodded. Okay, she said. One more question. The reunion. Your grandmother asked you to come. Yes. Are you going? I thought about my grandmother. About the specific quality of her voice when she calls. The warmth in it. The genuine pleasure of hearing from me. The way she says honey in a way that has always made me feel, in the specific compressed way of a single word, like I am the version of myself that has always existed rather than the version my family has needed me to be. Quick pause. If you want more stories like this in better quality, my Spotify's linked in the description. Yes, I said. She looked at me steadily. Bring the documentation. I spent 3 weeks building the file. Not frantically. Carefully. The way you build something that needs to hold up. Every wire transfer pulled from my bank records, dated and documented. The text messages in which each emergency had been presented. The specific language of each ask, calibrated to produce guilt and urgency. The follow-up messages after each payment, which had the quality of receipts. Brief, warm, moving immediately to the next subject. I called my cousin Mark, who is 6 years older than me, and who has watched our family from enough outside distance to see it clearly, and I told him what I had found. Not all of it. Not the recording. Not yet. But enough. He said, Emily, I've known for years something was wrong. I just didn't know how to say it to you. Why not? I said. Because you seemed like you knew, he said. And because they're your parents and I didn't think it was my place. If something like this comes out at the reunion, I said, I'd like you to be there. A pause. I'll be there, he said, and I'll stay. I called my Aunt Melissa, my father's sister, a woman I have always trusted in the specific way of someone who tells the truth in a family that prefers comfortable versions of it. I told her I needed her at the reunion and that something might happen. Does it have to do with the money? She said immediately. I was quiet. I've seen the pattern for years, she said. I didn't know the specifics, but I know your parents, Emily. I know which daughter they see. There will be documentation, I said. Then I'll be there, she said, and I'll bring Kleenex for myself because I'm going to cry, and I already know it. The file was complete by the Friday before the reunion. Every transfer, every message. The recording, which I had saved in 3 separate locations on 2 separate devices. A timeline printed on 3 pages, which I had prepared because I wanted to be precise and because precision had always been what separated me from the version of myself they had decided I was. I packed the navy dress from Target. I drove to Nashville. Uncle Rob's backyard was everything a family reunion should be. String lights, the good kind, warm white, strung between the fence posts and the house eaves in loops that made everything look slightly golden. 60 relatives arranged around folding tables covered in the specific combination of store-bought and homemade that family gatherings produce. My grandmother's roses along the back fence. The projector screen they'd set up for the photo slideshow. I arrived at 4:30. I sat beside my grandmother. I ate dinner and talked to cousins I hadn't seen in 2 years and watched Qley receive the ambient attention of a room that has always oriented toward her, the way rooms do when someone has spent their whole life learning to occupy the center of them. I watched my parents. My mother, at one point, passed behind my chair to get to the dessert table. She touched my shoulder briefly. "Glad you could make it," she said, with the warmth of someone who is glad but not surprised, because my grandmother had told her I was coming and because my parents always want me present. I understand that now in full, because my absence would require explanation. I said, "Wouldn't miss it." My phone was in my dress pocket. The file was in the Notes app, with a link to the cloud backup. The recording was saved locally and in 3 cloud locations. I was wearing earrings Grandma had given me for my 30th birthday, and a dress that cost $34.99. And I'd eaten 2 servings of my Aunt Karen's potato salad because it was excellent and I had driven 4 hours and I was not going to waste it. My father tapped his glass at 7:15 p.m. I know the time because I looked at my phone when I heard the sound, the specific instinct of someone who has decided that timestamps matter. He stood near the projector screen with his glass raised and his face arranged in the expression of a man who is about to say something he considers significant and wants the room to understand that he considers it significant. He said what he said. "We may have 2 daughters by birth, but we only have 1 daughter we're truly proud of." He raised his glass toward Qley, to Qley, our golden girl. The yard was quiet in the way yards go quiet when 60 people are deciding simultaneously whether what they just heard was what they thought they heard. Qley pressed her hand to her mouth. I heard her laugh, quietly, behind the hand, the specific laugh of someone who has been given exactly what she was expecting and finds the confirmation satisfying. Something inside me went entirely still. Not anger, not grief, not even the familiar low-frequency ache of a wound reopened. Something cleaner than any of those. The specific calm of a person who has been carrying something for a very long time and has just arrived at the place where she is going to set it down. I stood up. 60 heads turned. I walked to the projector table. I unplugged the photo slideshow cable. I plugged in my phone. "That's interesting, Dad," I said. The backyard was very quiet. "Since we're being honest tonight, I brought something too." I pressed play. Qley's voice filled the backyard at 7:17 p.m. "You have to stop asking Emily for money directly. She's getting suspicious." I watched my mother's face. She went the color of the tablecloth. Not pale, not red, something between them. A specific quality of color that belongs to a person whose system has just received information that their prepared responses are not calibrated for. She already paid the hospital bill. That should be enough. Enough? Mom, she has savings. I saw her bank statement when she left her laptop open at Christmas. 60 people were not making a sound. I watched them do what people do when they are hearing something that requires them to revise a significant understanding. The small physical adjustments, the shifts in posture, the faces moving through stages of reception. My Aunt Melissa had her hand over her mouth. My cousin Mark was very still, arms crossed, watching my father with the expression of a man who has suspected something for years and is now watching the suspicion become evidence. The recording moved through the medical bills, through the apartment deposit, the handbag, the car, each item landing with the specific weight of a thing that is real and documented and cannot be explained away. "Just keep calling her the burden," Qley said. "It works. She'll spend her whole life trying to prove she isn't." That was minute 7. That was when Qley bolted. Her chair scraped backward across Uncle Rob's patio stones with a sound that cut through the recording, and she stood with her face gone pale under her makeup, the specific pale of someone whose performance has been stripped from them without warning, who is standing in a room without the version of themselves they had prepared for the occasion. "Turn it off," she said. Her voice had lost its register. It was not the confident, purposeful voice from the recording. It was smaller than that. I didn't turn it off. She moved toward the driveway. Uncle Rob had been standing near the gate with a glass of lemonade that he had stopped drinking somewhere around minute 3, and he stepped into the gap without drama, just enough. Not blocking her exactly, just being present in a doorway. My father moved toward the projector. Mark stepped between him and the table, not aggressively. The way you step into a space when you've decided a space needs to be occupied. "Let it play," my grandmother said. Her voice was quiet. It had the quality of something structural, the kind of quiet that a room reorganizes itself around, because the person producing it has earned that kind of authority over a long time. My father stopped. The recording played the final section. My mother asking whether they should even invite me to the reunion. "We need her there," my father said. said. People will think we're cruel if she doesn't come. Then humiliate her a little, Qley said. She'll leave early and I'll still get my moment. I unplugged my phone. The backyard was very quiet. For anyone wondering, I said, I sent my parents $18,000 over 3 years. I have copies of every transfer, every message, and every excuse. My father found his voice, the specific voice he uses when he has decided to be the authoritative presence in a situation. You had no right to record a private conversation. Uncle Rob answered before I could. He has a way of speaking, slow, deliberate, the way of a man who rarely speaks in crowds and who, when he does, produces the effect of someone who has thought carefully about what he's going to say. And you, Uncle Rob said, looking at my father, had no right to use your daughter as an ATM while calling her a burden in front of the entire family. My father opened his mouth, closed it. The yard was still. In the still, the string lights went on doing what they do, warm and golden, indifferent to the specific human accounting that was happening beneath them. My grandmother stood up. She is 81 years old, and she stood the way very certain people stand, without urgency, without drama, just upright. She walked across the yard to where I was standing. She took my hand. She did not say anything. She did not need to. She just stood beside me, in front of 60 relatives, with my hand in hers, and the specific weight of that, the simple physical fact of one person choosing to stand beside another person in a room that is watching both of them, was the only thing that happened in the next 30 seconds, and it was enough. I want to tell you about the aftermath, because the aftermath is where the real story lives, and because I think it matters. My father, after 37 minutes of the kind of silence that family gatherings do not usually contain, tried to address the crowd. He said it had been taken out of context. He said recordings could be edited. He said I had always had a way of making things about me. My cousin Mark said, "Gary, stop." Just that. My father stopped. I don't know if he stopped because Mark said it or because the specific quality of 60 people looking at you with full comprehension is not an audience that a performance can recover, but he stopped. Qley was not in the backyard by that point. She had left in the car my parents had helped finance, which was not a metaphor I intended, but which is difficult not to notice. She sent me a text at 9:23 p.m. "You destroyed our family." I read the text. I added it to the file with a timestamp. Then I put my phone away. Aunt Melissa found me at the dessert table 20 minutes after the recording ended. She took a piece of cake and stood beside me, and we ate cake together for a while without saying anything. "I'm sorry," she said finally. "For what?" I said. "For not saying something sooner." She looked at the slice of cake in her hand. "I knew something was wrong. The way they talked about you when you weren't there. I should have said something." "You're saying it now," I said. She looked at me. She had been crying at some point. Not recently, but the evidence of it was still there. "You came in that dress," she said, "that clearance rack dress, and sat down beside your grandmother, and you had that recording in your pocket the whole time." "I did," I said. "How long have you known? That they took the money? A few months? That they called me a burden and meant it?" I thought about it. A while. I just needed the documentation. She was quiet. "What are you going to do now?" she said. I ate a bite of cake. My Aunt Karen's cake, which was worth the 4-hour drive. "I'm going to finish this cake," I said. "Then I'm going to say goodbye to Grandma. Then I'm going to drive home." "And your parents?" I thought about 22 years of the word difficult, about the way it had functioned, not as a description but as a management tool, a way of preemptively discrediting anything I might say about anything I might notice. I thought about $18,000, about the recording in 3 cloud locations, timestamped. "They know where I am," I said. 3 months later. I am in my apartment in Chattanooga. It is a Saturday morning in September, and the light is the specific quality that September light has, cooler and more honest than August. And I am drinking coffee that I made myself in a kitchen that is mine. I have not spoken to my parents since the reunion. Not because I have made a formal decision, because there has been nothing to say that the documentation has not already said, and because I have learned through 4 years of therapy and 1 evening in a backyard in Nashville that explanations offered to people who have already decided not to understand are not explanations. They are just more of your time. Qley called me twice. Both times I let it go to voicemail. The voicemails described my behavior at the reunion as unhinged and calculated, which are, I note, both true, though Qley uses them as pejorative terms and I find them accurate descriptions of what the situation required. My grandmother calls on Sunday evening.